Hello and welcome to winter in Flagstaff, Arizona. In this video we'll talk about something no photographer wants to discuss, and that's needing to get a piece of kit serviced or repaired. Hello and welcome to 5 Minute Photo. I'm Bill Ferris. In this video I'd like to talk about a recent experience I've had with my Nikon 200 to 500 millimeter f5.6e telephoto zoom lens. Now, like many folks, I pre-ordered this lens when it was first announced by Nikon in August of 2015, and I received delivery of the lens in September of that year. Well, just a few weeks after receiving the lens, following some discussion forums, there was talk about a problem with the lens where you could not simultaneously zoom or adjust the focal length of the lens while also engaging autofocus with your camera body. In that scenario, the lens would revert to a manual focus operational mode. I checked online with the Nikon USA website, my serial number of the lens, and indeed this copy was affected, and so I sent it to Nikon's LA service facility, and less than 2 weeks later received the lens back, having been serviced with a firmware upgrade. And I tested it when receiving the lens, and sure enough, the firmware upgrade addressed the problem. I was not able to zoom and have autofocus engaged prior to the firmware upgrade. The lens would go into manual mode. After getting the lens back, indeed, I am now able to simultaneously zoom with the lens and engage autofocus, tracking a moving subject. What I want to spend most of my time on in this video, however, is a different technical problem I encountered with this lens. And that started in November of 2015. In fact, it was on Veterans Day, November 11th. I was setting up some test photos in my backyard to check the vibration reduction effectiveness of the lens when I noticed that some of the exposures being made appeared to be overexposed. In fact, some looked extremely overexposed. Well, as I continued to explore that problem, what I came to believe was that my Nikon D610 camera body was no longer able to control the electromagnetic diaphragm of the 200 to 500 millimeter lens. Now, I tested my other f-mount lenses on the D610, and indeed, those lenses at different f-stop or aperture settings were still making properly exposed images. It was only the 200 to 500 that was overexposing at any aperture or any f-stop, I should say, larger than that f5.6. As you're increasing the f-stop number, you're decreasing the aperture size. The camera is choosing an exposure, a shutter speed to match that aperture size, and in this case those images were being overexposed, and what I came to believe was that the lens was operating at f5.6 continuously, and the camera again was not able to communicate with and control that diaphragm. So I called the Nikon USA Service Center and spoke with a call agent who, at the end of that conversation, recommended that I send in the lens to be evaluated. And that I did. In fact, I went over to the local UPS shop and shipped out the lens that very day on November 11th. And then over the next couple of weeks, I followed the progress of the service on the lens online. Nikon USA, on their website, they have a customer area where you can set up an account and track the progress of your lens with updates that Nikon provides, as well as ask questions about a service that's being provided to one of your Nikon products. Now, on the Monday following that November 11th date, I received an email from Nikon, one of their technical service personnel, and that technician said that the estimate for servicing the lens would be zero cost to me. It would be serviced under warranty, and that the service being done would be a firmware upgrade. Since I had just had the firmware upgrade performed just a few weeks prior, I used that email a question tool on the Nikon USA website, and I asked, is this the same firmware upgrade that was done just in October to the lens? And the reply I got was very simple, very straightforward. It read that this was the service that was needed for the lens, and it would be performed at no cost to me as the customer. It would be performed under warranty. Well, about a week after that, UPS delivered the lens back to me, and this was the week of Thanksgiving. I opened the box, attached it to the D610 camera body, and it didn't take long before I was able to confirm that indeed that firmware upgrade had not corrected the problem. The camera was still overexposing at f-stops greater than f5.6, and my camera was still able to control the diaphragms of my other f-mount lenses, but not of the 200 to 500. So again, I called Nikon and had a conversation with a call center agent, and she started a service ticket for the lens and asked that I make some photographs demonstrating or illustrating the problem that I was experiencing. So I did that. I made a series of photographs using this lens on my D610 camera body at different apertures, showing that as the apertures decrease, as those f-stop numbers increase, the images became more and more overexposed. And so on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, I received an email from a Nikon technician again, stating that they requested that I send in both the D610 camera body and the 200 to 500 millimeter zoom lens. Well, I was reluctant, as you might imagine, to give up possession of both the camera body and the lens. However, I wanted to get this problem resolved as soon as possible, and so that very day, the day before Thanksgiving, I packaged both the camera body, my D610, and the lens, took them to the UPS store, and using a prepaid UPS shipping label that Nikon had provided, I shipped both items again to their Los Angeles service facility. And over the course of the next few weeks, I again followed the progress of the service through that Nikon USA website. When they received the camera and the lens, they indicated to me that the camera was in good working order, but that the lens was on a parts hold. I didn't know what parts they were waiting on, but that updated information on the website indicated that there was a physical problem, a mechanical problem with the lens, and that when the parts would be delivered to that LA facility, they would be able to effect the repair. And ultimately, Nikon did send back both the camera and the lens to me on the weekend before Christmas week, and I was able to test the lens on December 20th with my D610 body and confirm that indeed I was now able, with the camera, to control the diaphragm of this lens and make properly exposed images. That was a big relief on a number of levels, primarily because I now had a lens in good working order. Also had both my camera body and lens back in my possession, and that was a little nerve-wracking, especially to have the camera body out of my possession for several weeks. But there was also, well, I want to be careful with my words here because I'm not intending with this video to bash Nikon at all. My intention is to provide you with an objective summary of my service and repair experience with this product, and also to share a couple of suggestions that I've offered to Nikon, some recommendations for improving the customer service experience they provide, suggestions that I hope were taken as constructive and that could lead to, in the future, improved customer service relations. And so let me say that there were some slightly frustrating or stressful elements to the service experience. One was that the level of communication was not what I had hoped. I was never able to speak with an actual technician, someone who actually understands the mechanics and the workings of the Nikon products. So I always felt as though I was speaking with somebody who didn't really quite understand exactly what I was experiencing. The second item that was a bit frustrating was that over the course of the several weeks, it was 6 weeks during which the lens was being evaluated, serviced, and repaired by Nikon. During those 6 weeks, I spoke to 4 different call center agents, and each time I had to describe in detail what was happening with the lens, and what I was interpreting was going on based on the images I was making with the camera and lens. It did not appear that those call center agents had access to, or at least not ready access to, a database with detailed information about customer equipment services that either have happened in the past or are currently ongoing. And then the third item was that I've not yet, despite having requested it, I've not yet really been given just a plain, simple English explanation for exactly what the problem was with the lens that was repaired. The lens was returned with a packing slip, and that packing slip did include some brief shorthand notes on the work that was done, and so I'll share that with you right now. They repaired the aperture mechanism. They also replaced the diaphragm. The Nikon replaced an adjacent lens element within the 200 to 500. They also did an adjustment to the diaphragm control mechanism, and then they tested the focusing of the lens. They tested the VR performance on the lens. They did a general check and a general cleaning of the lens before they packaged it for shipment back to me. In fact, the camera, while there was no technical problem with that D610 camera body, Nikon did perform a inspection and then a cleaning and check of its functionality before packaging it for return shipment as well. And so what are the recommendations that I have suggested to Nikon? And again, these have been suggested to them, so you're not the first folks to hear about this, and I have communicated directly with Nikon about these recommendations, and again, they're intended to be strictly constructive in their quality, and that is, number one, I think to provide some manner for customers to have direct communication, whether that's by IM or email or some manner of communication with a technician during a service experience. Someone who understands the mechanics of that product and who can translate the problem into plain language that a person can understand. Help them understand that Nikon understands what the problem is and is on the road to getting that problem repaired. The second would be for Nikon to provide those call center agents with some type of a database that does track in detail customer service and repair experiences for products, so that they have that background information, that context when they receive a call from someone like me who may be speaking to the third or fourth person about the same problem. With that database of information, that call center agent would be able to get up to speed in fairly short order with what the problem that's being addressed is. And then I think the third item that I've recommended to Nikon is that their website be updated to make that user interface a bit more seamless, a bit more intuitive, and to provide more regular updates on the status of a service or repair that's going on with a Nikon product. So again, this video, it's not intended to be a bashing session of Nikon. I love shooting with Nikon products. I've been shooting with and using Nikon products for over 20 years now, and I thoroughly, fully intend to continue to do so. In particular, I'm looking forward to continuing to shoot with the 200 to 500. In fact, I'm going to close out this video by sharing with you just a few sample photos that I've made since getting the lens back from Nikon. Over the last few weeks, I've made almost 3,500 exposures with the lens on family travel that we did over Christmas, as well as a trip I made to Bosque del Apache National Wildlife Refuge in New Mexico over the 2016 New Year's weekend. So as we close out with those images, I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time on 5 Minute Photo.